Hi guys! At the beginning of the short stories unit, I told you that we were going to look at some of the elements of voice. Voice is essentially what you hear in your head when you're reading something. And the first element of voice that we looked at was diction, word choice. And we talked about denotation and connotation, the first being the dictionary definition and the second being the emotional impact of a given word. There are 4 other elements of voice besides diction: detail, imagery, syntax, and tone. So we're going to build on our understanding of voice now by considering detail. Detail, as you can see on the slide in front of you, refers to facts, observations, and incidents. It essentially makes an abstract concept a little more concrete. It gives you the lay of the land. It focuses your attention a bit. It helps you to see a setting a little more clearly or a character in your head, to visualize something that otherwise might not be terribly specific. For instance, I can say I looked out my window and saw a tree. Well, a tree isn't very specific. You might think it's autumn. It's a tree with red leaves on it. Or, a lot of the leaves have just fallen, so it's a dead tree, or it's a fir tree, or it's a magnolia tree. Without details, it stays vague and abstract. Details will focus you a little bit and make you understand more clearly what the author sees in his or her head. Now, on the flip side, you can, especially in like a murder mystery or a horror story or something like that, you can leave a lot of details out. Just give a little bit. And that would have the impact of maybe understatement or of suspense, of creating a little maybe ambiguity, and you have to work harder, the reader, to figure out what's going on. So detail's really important in stories. Now, granted, too much detail and most people just flip past all of that to get to the next section. So you've got to be careful how much detail you use, and you want to use it with impact. Now, just because details are concrete and statements of fact, that doesn't mean that they can't have emotional impact. Just like diction choices have connotative meaning, details can have meaning as well. So there are 2 kinds of details. There are objective details, which simply do make an observation. They tend to stay on the sort of factual plane, and they remain unbiased. So you really can't tell what the author feels about the subject if you are looking at objective details. You can just visualize what the author sees. Evaluative details, on the other hand, are connotative. They have biases. They make judgments. You can tell what the author is feeling about his or her subject when you look at evaluative details. So, for example, I took an excerpt, and I see there's a typo. I will go back and fix that. This is from Shame by a Thousand Cuts by James Patterson. And I'm going to read this to you. I have color-coded the kinds of details. So the purple details are going to be objective, and the blue ones are going to be evaluative. And since this is bothering me, I'm going to change this right now so that, as an English teacher, it's not staring at me the whole time. Sorry, there we go. I fanned the bills out in my hand. The words food coupon were etched in inky capital letters on each one. As I studied the bills, my brother looked down at me, the faint shadow of a mustache beginning to sprout on his upper lip. When I caught his eye, his nose scrunched, his eyes tightened, and his neck recoiled. He eyed the bills, then me. Sweat developed on my forehead. My skin prickled. I wanted to hide. So the first part is pretty objective. So you can see the food coupons fanned out in his hand. You can see a little bit of what they looked like because the words food coupon are capital letters etched in ink, very clear. But there's not a lot of bias or judgment yet. Even the fact that his brother has a shadow of a mustache on his lip, it tells you that his brother's on the cusp of manhood, like he's probably a teenager, like a little older teenager, but it doesn't give you a lot of feeling. But the next part, the blue part, does. You can definitely tell the attitude of the author quite clearly by those details. So take a moment take a look at the question that I've posted and tell me what attitude the author clearly has about the fact that his family must now use food coupons. Okay, you know that I like to use pictures and art. I do them for predictions, I do them for inferences, we can do them for details as well. So, carefully observe this photo I found online. I typed in clown into Google and this popped up. So, what do you see? Just like we do with predictions or inferences, in your head, objectively look at everything you can see. Don't just say clown and girl. Think about what the clown is wearing, where the clown is looking, where is the little girl looking, what is the clown holding, what are their poses, why is there so much space above them? Always when you're observing, look for all the objective details you can, because they have a very important impact on how we feel about something. So now I'm going to show you 2 details that I wrote. An objective detail would be something like the clown rested his head on the girl's shoulder. It's true, right? And there's really no bias or judgment about that. It's a simple factual observation, but it still allows you to understand where the clown's head is and that there's somebody else in the picture and that sort of thing. However, this picture kind of freaked me out a little bit. So I wrote an evaluative detail. The young girl shrank from the looming clown. So now I want you to pause and think to yourself, what attitude is suggested by the evaluative details in that example? And you can also, while you're doing that, focus on my diction choices, because of course, none of this is really separate. We may learn about it separately to make it understandable, so we'll chunk it so we understand the steps. But in reality, an author's using all of these things pretty much simultaneously. So take a moment and see if you can come up with the attitude suggested by the details here, and tell me why you think so. Okay. Now, I had originally made this as a pear deck, but then I thought maybe it would be better if I let you do this on your own. So don't worry, there's no pear deck to answer. That's a synchronous thing, and this is an asynchronous assignment. So instead of the pear deck, you're going to be answering it in the Edpuzzle. So here's another example from Born of Man and Woman, the first short story we read. And what I want you to do is think about which part of the description is objective detail, and which part is evaluative detail. So one's going to be just observation, and one's just going to be judgment. This day it had water falling from upstairs. It fell all around. I saw that. The ground of the back I watched from the little window. The ground it sucked up the water like thirsty lips. It drank too much and it got sick and runny brown. I didn't like it. So which part is objective detail and which part is evaluative detail? Okay, let's try one more. This is from Jesus Colón's Little Things Are Big, the article that we read after we had read Those Who Don't by Sandra Cisneros from the House on Mango Street. I was like a rude animal walking on 2 legs, just moving on, half running along the long subway platform, leaving the children and the suitcase and the woman with the baby in her arms. I ran up the steps of that long concrete stairs in 2s. Now I want you to tell me whether you think this is an objective detail or an evaluative one. You want to explain your thinking. And the reason for that is, I think that depends upon how you're focusing on the diction. There might be a possibility for, some part objective detail and some part evaluative. So explain what you're thinking so that I understand. Finally, we have this photo here. I want you to carefully observe this photo. It is, and we're coming in on Thanksgiving now, although this was, 11 years ago. Oh, but actually, oddly enough, it was on the same day. We're also going to have it on November 26th of this year. So this was the U.S. Army having Thanksgiving in Afghanistan. Okay, we were, we still are at war, frighteningly enough. So look at the photo, look at everything, think about all the different things that you see, all the details in the photo. And then think about how it makes you feel. Because what I'm going to want you to do next is to compose 2 different kinds of details. So first, I would like you to compose your own objective detail to describe this picture. You don't have to have 15 of them. You can have 1, you can have 2, you can have 3. Don't go crazy. But write them in sentence form, describing what you see, trying not to make any kinds of connotative judgments. Try not to invest them with emotion. Just factual observations about what you see. Now, I want you to try and compose an evaluative detail or 2 to describe this picture. So at this point, you do want to invest it with feeling. Now you want to think about how this picture made you feel when you looked at it and you learned that these were U.S. soldiers far from home in Afghanistan during our national Thanksgiving holiday. Write a detail, write 2, write 3. Try to invest them with some feeling. And again, this doesn't just come from some, long phrase. Of course, you want to think about your diction choices when you're creating your details so that they will have emotional impact. And that's pretty much it. So now you have, hopefully, a semi-decent understanding of what details are. And we can continue by looking at Of Mice and Men. And one of the first things we're going to do with Of Mice and Men is look at the setting and talk about the details that help to build up the setting. So thank you, and I will see you soon.